Oh yeah, I had some other glowing reviews for why you should learn to code. There's the capacity to have massive impact on people, and there's the it's difficult to describe, but just the sense of collaboration, of participating in this international, intergenerational project of millions of people and billions of hours of generosity, of people just making something because it's cool and then giving it up to the world, and then you get to take that thing and use it to make more cool stuff and more, and I wish I could do a good explanation of the layers of tools that make the internet possible, but there's just stack after stack of them, and each one of them was built by a collection of people, and they could have made millions of dollars off it, but they said, no, I'm going to make it open and share it. And there's just this layer upon layer of people, some of the smartest people in the world getting together, making something brilliant, and then just giving it up to the world and saying, now make something cool. So that's a really nice experience, just to participate and play around in that international, intergalactic project. And the other nice thing for me, as a sort of someone with a social justice bent, for the nice thing about learning code and being fluent in the language of computers, is you get to resist this onslaught of our civil liberties that we're seeing from sort of states and corporations. It's actually, we're talking about GCSB and NSA and stuff. It's actually relatively easy to bypass a lot of the spying activity. With a little bit of knowledge, you can get around a lot of the wholesale dragnetting of your information. And that's it's a nice thing to have for yourself to preserve your own privacy, but it's only really good if you can share it with millions of other people, if freedom of speech and privacy are the norm. And by learning how to code, you get to create these spaces that respect people's privacy and bring out the best in people and so on. And it's a tremendous privilege to be doing that kind of work. I was thinking back to, say, 10 years ago when I started hacking code and comparing it to what it's like to hack code now. And it's really difficult to describe to someone who isn't familiar with code, but it's like, I was trying to make an analogy. You imagine if you're a carpenter instead of a coder, and you're used to using like a handsaw and a step ladder to do your work, and then one day you turn up and your handsaw has been replaced by a lightsaber, and your step ladder has been replaced by a jetpack, and it's like in the space of a few years, people have just invented these incredible tools that allow you to do so much more stuff, connect with so many more people, and they just gave it up for free, and they're like, yeah, use these, you want them. That's a really exciting experience that a lot of coders are having, and coders aren't particularly good at telling everyone else about how awesome it is. So yeah, there's a lot of different ends to code, and I would like to talk to people that are interested in learning code. I can point you in some directions afterwards. Oh, I should have introduced at the start of this lecture that I intend to ramble across many different things, and I don't necessarily plan to be coherent. So this is totally unrelated to what I was saying just a moment ago. We don't know how to fix this. Whenever you hear anyone talk about the word austerity, I want you to subconsciously replace that word austerity with, we don't know how to fix this. So when the government says we need austerity, they mean we don't know, it's fucked, we don't know. They're saying we've got ourselves into a situation economically and socially that we don't know how to repair, and we're going to just try and hold things together for long enough for it to sort itself out. And there's quite a few countries now that look like they're not going to hold it together for long enough. You look at what's going on in Spain and Greece and Egypt, obviously, and a bunch of other places, they're not holding it together. And everywhere that austerity is imposed, i.e. more or less the whole world, is at risk of not holding it together long enough. But this austerity thing, this we don't know how to fix this, is basically a huge signal to the market to say, figure out a way to provide these government services for cheaper. So globally, we've been practicing this thing of making government services be provided for cheaper since about the 80s. And our solution to that problem of delivering services for cheaper was basically outsourcing. So instead of having a government department do something, you have a corporation do it. So you have Serco, for instance, a corporation that most people haven't heard of, that runs the traffic system in Ireland and the private prisons in Auckland and everything in between. There's just massive faceless entities that can do things for cheaper than the government can do them, and so they get all these contracts. So huge numbers of services that used to be provided by the government are now provided by these enormous conglomerates. I think we're starting to reach the end of the savings you can make from outsourcing. I think we've pretty much hit the efficiency barrier. There's only so far you can go. And part of what's happening with the internet and its effect on society is that we're transitioning from outsourcing as a cost-saving measure to this beautiful new thing called disintermediation. And disintermediation is kind of one of those things that I say and I go, so good. It's good stuff. You're all familiar with disintermediation if you participate in social media. So the old traditional model of media is you have a few privileged people with a lot of money that control what information goes out. So you might have 1 million people submit a story and then one publisher says, this is the story that goes out today. Disintermediation is what we've got in the social media space. We have 1 million people, they just tell their story. And one or two of those things get popular for some reason through the complex filtering of social relationships. And that becomes the story of the day. So we're starting to get quite comfortable with that in the media space because it was one of the first things to get disintermediated. But everything, every institution is undergoing this disintermediation. I mean, the music industry, really obvious example. We used to have record companies that made records and then shipped them around. And now we just have people going on YouTube, getting a few fans, selling some stuff on Bandcamp without that intermediary. What that means in the context of austerity is a lot of government services, instead of being outsourced, they're going to be disintermediated. So I was trying to think of examples. I thought of a real dull one. You know, you get like potholes in the street and, I don't know, the handrail on your sidewalk buggers out or something. Traditionally, you'd have a council employee whose job it is to go around and like check up on the streets and the handrails and stuff and, oh look, there's a problem here. I'll have to call in the tradesman to fix this problem. And that whole process of having someone whose job it is to just go around patrolling and go through the bureaucracy of employing a tradesman to solve this problem is super expensive. You know, there's so much overhead in that. A disintermediated version is, say, everyone might have an app on their smartphone where you see a pothole and you take a photo and you just send it into some cloud. You don't know, you just like, pothole, here it is, and you send it away. And then some tradesman goes, oh, there's a pothole, and then they go and fix it. And you've cut out the person in the middle whose job it was to go patrolling, so you've saved a whole lot of money. And in this context of austerity that we live in, any cost saving is going to get picked up really quickly. So I'm sort of vaguely predicting that as many government services that can be disintermediated will be in the near future. And yes.
Will not this person lose their job?
Yeah, oh definitely. We're going to lose so many jobs.
But will this person who will make the pictures get paid at some point?
That's a very interesting question as a society to figure out. So I was thinking about that. An example. You guys heard of Airbnb? It's a site where you can, you know, go and stay in someone's house instead of staying at a hotel, essentially. And you pay them a bit of money for the privilege and you get to meet them and hang out in their house, and it's quite nice. Last year, Airbnb hosted more people than all the Hilton hotels in the world because it's a really effective method for housing people that are traveling. And for me, I think that's a great thing. You know, you've got the social capital of connecting people from diverse perspectives, and they might have a meal together and have a nice conversation and so on. From the perspective of resource use, it's really great because you've just got people that have got a spare room and suddenly they get to make a little cash off it and utilise that spare space. But if you look at it in terms of our ways of looking at economics, it's terrible news. It's cost millions of jobs for the hotels. It's cost billions of dollars, you know. And our ways of measuring economics are just totally not in line with our human values. You know, our economic value and human value are on these funny divergent paths. Yeah, what was the specific question again? Can you repeat what you said? Oh, the jobs. Yes. Yeah. So since 1970, production as an efficiency, as in our ability to do stuff with less effort, has been on this continuous ramp. But our wages have been on this flat line, you know, and our ability to, you know, our cost-saving and time-saving devices just increase. You get more and more devices in your house that save you time, and yet you still have to work really hard, and it doesn't feel like you've saved any time at all. That is, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a total economic failure. We can make so much stuff for easier and for cheaper. We've got so many devices to save us time, and yet we don't have any more time. It's because our economics are totally buggered. Like when I go to the supermarket, whenever I can, I go to the robot instead of the checkout person. I would prefer we lived in a society where no one has to work at a checkout. Robots are really good at that job. Humans are really good at creative stuff, at empathy stuff, at creating imaginary things that you couldn't possibly have thought of a minute before. And if we can create a system where robots do all the boring shit, then we should do that and let the humans do what the humans are good at. At the moment, we're totally failing at that. We're just getting more and more unemployed people as we keep on coming up with ways to do more work with less effort. So it's a discussion yet to be had for the society. This disintermediation thing, big and juicy, got me thinking about economics. A rather daunting subject. I wanted to give a rough and ready, this is probably the bit where I start lying, rough and ready definition of capitalism and socialism. So more or less, capitalism is the idea that you have individuals that own what they call the means of production, so the factories or the computers or the whatever that make the stuff. Socialism is the idea that you don't have an individual that owns the stuff, that owns the thing that makes the stuff. You have a group of people or a nation or whatever. And my loose interpretation of Marxist theory is that the ownership of the means of production has a dramatic effect on the way a society gets structured. So a capitalist society like the States has quite a different sort of set of social relationships to, say, the communist Russia. There's people related to each other in a different way. And there's some limitations to that theory, but it's a rough and ready, useful thing to think about, that the way that you, whoever owns the thing that makes the thing, changes the way society forms. So in a capitalist society, you might have a boss who employs a lot of workers, whereas in a socialist society, you just have a lot of comrades that all work together. In practice, neither of these things have worked out really well. But what we're seeing on the internet is a new mode of production, peer production. So no one really owns Wikipedia. There's a foundation that looks after it, but it doesn't own it in the way that, say, Apple owns the Apple factory. Punishment and reward and the market and price signals and this sort of stuff, peer production really doesn't respond to any of that. It's sort of a lot of the content online, so a lot of your activity every day on your social media, the work that you're doing of filtering out stories and selecting which one is the best, you're not doing that because you're getting paid. You're doing that through some much more fuzzy intrinsic motivators, like the desire to connect with people or something like that. You're not doing it because you're worried about some punishment, and you're not doing it because you're going to get some clear reward. You're doing it for intrinsic motivations. So this peer production thing, we're seeing more and more of it, and I think it's reasonable to suspect that we're going to get a new politics as a result. So in the same way as when you have private ownership of factories, you get a certain politics. When you have nobody owning the factories and nobody owning the products that come out of it, I think we get to see some new politics. And it might be a bit of a leap, but to my mind, what we're seeing with the Arab Spring and the Indignados in Spain and Latin America and the Occupy movement and the ongoing movement of movements that started in maybe the 90s and is still rolling, with millions of people coming out to their city streets and saying, this is not good enough, this isn't right, this isn't what I signed up for. I feel like part of that is this new politics being worked out on the street. So it was like born on the internet, this idea that everyone should have access to everything, that you shouldn't have to have, you shouldn't have to have certain privileges to get access to certain things. That is now, people are meeting on the streets and they're trying to work that idea out in real life, and it's totally new. Like, If any of you spent any time at Occupy, you'll realise that it was like a bunch of amateurs, you know, myself included, trying to work something out for the first time. But I think it's potentially a really important political force. It doesn't fit on the left-right spectrum. There's no representation for it in government at all, and it's on a massive increase. And essentially, we get to make it up what it means, which for me is quite an exciting thought, that we get to invent a whole new politics. I mean, even the nature of this politics is being peer-produced, you know. So you've got people sort of getting together in a city square, inventing certain protocols for how they talk to each other, coming to a conclusion, you know, a statement of intent or a manifesto or something, and then sharing that to the world, and then some other group of people in another city in another language take that manifesto and those protocols and remix them for themselves, chop it up, reformat it, and send it back out to the world, and it's getting passed around like this. It's a very turbulent time and very interesting, and each of us has an opportunity to have a significant impact on the direction of it. You know, so much of the, you know, when I went down to Occupy for the first day, I saw people doing these hand signals, you know, whatever, that had come out of Occupy Wall Street. And the reason that I knew that was because someone had gone down there with their camera and they made a little film about the hand signals and how they worked. And then they put it on YouTube, and then I saw the video on YouTube. And then when I went down to the city square in Wellington, I knew what these things meant, you know. And it's a really simple, it's just someone grabbed their camera and captured a bit and put it online. And yet, that video was watched by millions of people who got to participate in cities all around the world and have some effect on their communities. And any of us can grab a camera and just capture a little bit and put it online. You know? That's, yeah, it's a tremendous age for those of us privileged enough to have access to this agency machine. Yeah, this is sort of when I started thinking about the GCSB, because you can't talk about the internet today without talking about the GCSB. I've got a little theory about what motivates humans, or what progress is or something, and I think there's sort of two tracks of progress. There's this aesthetic thing, like we're motivated to have these aesthetic experiences, like we like to consume art, or you know, human relationships and good food, and we just like to have nice sensations, you know. It's what we do as a species partially, it's just this aesthetic thing, it's like, good stuff. And then there's this real pragmatic aspect to progress as well. So the pragmatic thing for me is just like, I call it convenience, like this desire, this massive intergenerational drive to achieve more with less effort. In the internet world, that means achieving a task with fewer clicks is the ultimate aim of every new web startup right now. If you can figure out how to do a task with 2 less clicks than the other guy, you've got yourself $1 million business. Convenience, as dull as that word is one of the primary driving forces of where we develop our technology. And unfortunately, what we're starting to realize, what we're coming up against now with this GCSB stuff, is that the interests of convenience are completely opposite to the interests of privacy. So it's so much easier for me to, simple example, on your iPhone, when you take a photo, it logs where you were when you took that photo, because later on, if you're in that same place, you might want to pull up all the photos I had when I was in this place, right? Like, it's a convenient thing. I want to know, show me the photos when I was at my friend's house last. Oh, cool. Remember that cool time we had, right? Instead of having to like scroll through 1 million photos and get to the right one, it's a nice little feature that someone thought of. The consequence of that happens to be that it's tracking your location all the time and reporting that back to Apple Inc. But the motivator to record that information in the first place was just a simple convenience thing, and the implications of that are quite profound when you think that the person that sold you the phone now knows where you are all the time, perfectly capable tracking device for our whole population. Not necessarily the best outcome, but it is unconsciously the direction we're heading in, is essentially that privacy is more or less dead now because we've taken so many strides in the direction of convenience. When we talk about GCSB, we're really talking about NSA and PRISM and so on, and the NSA sits there harvesting 75% of the content of the web, and indexing it and storing it forever. And that content is coming mostly from Gmail, Facebook, Apple, Skype, Microsoft. There's a few key services that they're harvesting the data from. And all of that data was voluntarily surrendered to those companies. So it wasn't voluntarily submitted to the NSA, but it was given to those companies. So we as consumers go on Facebook and tell everyone about everything, you know. We have this consumer force that we exercise in the marketplace that says, don't worry about my privacy. It's not necessary. Just give me the convenience. And then we start to see the implications of that, like, oh, isn't it weird that the government can type in my email address and know everything about me from where I've been to what I've spent my money on to who I know to what we're talking about. Isn't that weird? Isn't that uncomfortable? And so we go, stop the GCSB bill. And without sort of considering the full chain of events that led to this point, once again, that's concerning for me. It reveals a lack of literacy around the issue of surveillance and a lack of understanding of the environment we're in. That is, whether we like it or not, we've built a machine, which I like to call the God machine sometimes, which knows everything about everyone. And it's more and more immersive and more pervasive, yeah.
Do you see the GCV and like your privacy like being solved like within the future? Sort of thing, like, yeah,
can it be solved?
Your privacy, like, you know, just keep it.
Maybe. Can you get your privacy back? You know? Maybe. I think it's quite possible for individuals to reclaim their privacy if they are willing to sort of, you know, wade in and learn the skills of it. But I'm not too sure about the value of a few individuals having privacy if the mass of people don't. You know, I haven't really come to the end of this thought yet, but I think you want privacy to be a universal right. You want freedom of speech to be a universal right, not just reserved for people that have a particular skill set and particular resources. There are, of course, like I said, when I said, you know, no one's driving it, there's sort of these different characters that are at play. All of the engineers that are working for Capital, more or less all of them, are working to undermine your privacy. But more or less all of the hackers are working to rebuild it. So if we get more hackers, then we might have a show. You know, like, I wish I could say that Lumio is on the cutting edge of privacy, but it's totally not. We're working with a whole bunch of other services to deliver our content, and some of those services happen to live in the States, and so they are compromised by the NSA and by PRISM, and so we're going to have to put in the extra resources to get off those services and move to more, you know, ones that actually respect privacy, and it's a massively expensive undertaking that we don't have the resources to do right now, and there is no market drive to do it. There's no one, we get maybe 10 people a week saying, hey, can you hook up with Facebook, but one person a week saying, hey, can you protect my privacy more? You know, like, it's really difficult for a business to prioritize looking after people's privacy because it's just not a demand coming from the market. But we do have, you know, more drivers at work than just business, and the people like myself that are working on this project, fortunately, have a little bit of understanding about the implications of privacy and free speech, and are therefore quite focused on doing everything we can to reclaim privacy online. And it will be, you know, if you ask me again in a year, I'll be able to say, yes, Lumio was cutting edge in the world of privacy. There are really specific engineering techniques you can do that improve the likelihood of someone having their information more private. So at the moment, most of the content online lives in a few servers in a few buildings in the States. You know, it's all just pushed into the same place because it's faster to do that. If you can put all the servers next to each other, they can talk to each other faster. So if you've got all the world's information in a small room, of course you're going to have people breaking in and stealing everyone's stuff all the time, you know, whether that's a government or some other force. But instead, if you just change that architecture and instead of putting it all in one room, you just put it all over the web everywhere, you know, instead of having a central storage point, you distribute it, then there's no big target for any one actor to go snooping on. So, I mean, in the Lumio case, I expect that's the solution that we're going to come to, is that we just don't have a central point. And there's really no reason why every online service we use isn't distributed like that. It's just an engineering challenge. And like I say, there's not a lot of capital behind that challenge. There's a lot of enthusiasm, but not a lot of money. So yeah, I have really high hopes for that sort of stuff in the future, but we'll see. The biggest sort of attempt we've seen at that is a project called Diaspora, which some of you might recognise, which is an attempt to sort of do a version of Facebook that respects your privacy, so it gives you all the social media without the harvesting of your information and selling it to advertisers. They've had some real difficulty building that thing. It's a really difficult challenge, you know. Creating a system that talks to all these different nodes around the world with bugger all money behind them. They have actually announced this week they've paired up with this really amazing dude who's trying to sort of shepherd them into this really amazing foundation that's going to help with that. But basically, it's really, really difficult. Whereas if you want to sell ads to people, you know, you just click your fingers and you've got millions of dollars at your fingertips. So, yeah. Speaking of Facebook, this party sucks. Nearly everyone I know, myself included, is on Facebook nearly every day or more. And nearly every one of them is not having a particularly good time. And very few people are proud of the time they spend on Facebook. You know, if I went to a party and everyone I knew was there, and they were just sitting around like against the wall, silently, and then someone pulled out a funny photo and like 3 people laughed at it, and then someone like told you what they had for breakfast, and you know, like this. If I walked into that space, I would just be like, I gotta leave, or I gotta do something. You know, like those are your options. If you're at a party that sucks, you leave or you make it cool. You know, and I just see everyone I know. You know, there's a few exceptions, maybe 1 in 100 people I know that have not given in and come to this shitty party, but they're all there going, this sucks, you know, oh, this party sucks. And it's like, if you want to have a good time, you know, go somewhere else and have a good time, or make this a good time. And it's actually up to us, if you want to be there and you want to have a good time, to make it a good time. All your friends are there, they're all interesting people. All these people you don't know are there as well, and you can connect with them and you can share your perspectives. I've been on a little kind of self-indulgent campaign since the start of this year called the People's Occupation of Facebook. And you know, Facebook is a shopping mall. It's a really hard time trying to make a good party happen in a shopping mall. But if you really engage a few people that are on your team, you can do it. You can actually have a good time in the shopping mall if you ignore all the ads. There's a thing called ad blocker, which you should all install right away on all of your machines. Actually, you can turn all the ads off just like that. And if you really make the effort to cut through all the things on Facebook that try to stop you from having a good party, you can do it. You know, I've had a really good time this year reaching out to people that I respect or whose perspectives I know challenge mine, and engaging them in conversation, and actually occasionally, you know, once a week you have a good conversation. I'm like, okay, I don't feel so bad about being here anymore. So yeah, I wanted to get people to think about, if you're at a shitty party, what do you usually do? And there's this sort of tagline that's been bouncing around my head this year, which is, I want us collectively to think about social media as something more than just socializing now. I think it's about society building. And prepping for this talk, I was saying, I'm thinking about internet, or am I thinking about society? And I realized it's the same thing now. There's not really an edge. There's not a line that you draw and you say, this is the internet thing and this is society thing. It's all this big mess together. And if you're in society having a sucky time, I hope I can help, or you can help yourself. This is another little thing. When the printing press was invented, as this device for, you know, like making books and things, that was really the moment that the human species learned to read. And that's, you know, totally transformed society when you give people literacy. It totally transformed our relationship to, say, religion. And I mean, it made science possible. That was pretty cool. Now we've got the internet. It's like the next level printing press where people are learning to write. As a species, we're learning to write, and we're just figuring it out now. Like, it's only been a couple of years that your average person could get online and write something and contribute it to the public discourse. And that for me is incredibly exciting. I think I'd rather have 10 billion tweets than 10 books, because our history is written in books. And I don't know how many people here have ever written a book, but I imagine it takes a hell of a lot of time. You've actually got to be in a relatively privileged position to carve out that time to write a book. You know, so our history has been written by a very peculiar kind of person that has that kind of time on their hands. You know, it's not written by people like us. But we're suddenly in this new era where we all get to write the history. You know, we all get to write the future as well. The outcome of this, having everyone writing, and this idea of disintermediation and cost saving and Lumioing is starting to make me think about what if we're disintermediating government services, if we're democratizing the ability to write, you know, maybe we are moving beyond the age where we have professional writers, professional lawmakers, professional decision makers, and we're entering into this weird, messy new phase where we get to make these decisions and these laws collaboratively in the way that we make the news of the day collaboratively. And that's pretty much the most exciting thing I can think about. That's me. Oh no, also, this is the group I formed for this room. If you want to find a whole lot of really inspirational videos and articles and books and bloggers and people that are actually talking about how internet is changing society and so on, you can go on there. If you would like to continue the conversation in virtual space, you can just press request access or request membership or something. We built the button about 2 weeks ago. It's really exciting. I would really love to keep this going online because so much of the stuff that I'm into is multimedia and I can't just stand up and tell you the video. You have to watch it yourself. How do people feel about having a discussion of something?